Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
We've been expecting you.
Monday, time for our maven of the supernatural, Denise Pridemore. This is the Paranormal Pride. Join to listen and chat live on WBHM-DB.com or Spreaker app. Search WBHM-DB every Monday at 7 p.m. Central for your supernatural paranormal fix. Welcome to the Paranormal Pride, where the show is about the guest and the listener.
Welcome to the Paranormal Pride. I'm Denise Pridemore, your host, and my guest tonight is Amelia Cotter. And I'm going to tell you a couple things about her that is really interesting. One of those things is that her and I went to the same high school, different years. We met at Haunted Road Media Paracon the very first time, and she is an amazing author of multiple books. So you guys are going to have a fun time with this tonight, and I know I am. So welcome, Amelia.
Thank you.
And I will let a few other things out as we go through this, because I don't want to tell everybody everything and get them all worked up and have them asking us 50,000 questions at one time. So how did you get involved in the paranormal? Because that is always the catalyst for everyone, the getting involved. And that's the first question anybody's going to ask you. So I'm sorry, but I have to ask it.
Yeah, sure. I guess it's a two-part answer. So I was very interested starting when I was a little kid in going to the library and reading books about ghosts. I don't know where this interest really came from. I've always had it. I was always fascinated by it. And I studied in quotation fingers when I was a kid, different ghost books and also folklore books. Like I had the scary stories books when I was a kid. And then later in life, I decided that I wanted to be a writer. And I thought, wouldn't it be the coolest thing ever to write books about ghosts? Because that seems like the most romantic, awesome thing to read, both write and read ghost stories. And when I moved to Chicago, now when I was a kiddo growing up in Maryland, I did a lot of exploring with friends of abandoned places and cemeteries and haunted locations. I mean, from growing up in that area that there really wasn't a whole lot to do around Bel Air, Maryland. So that's how we had fun. And I got interested in sort of ghost investigation that way. And then when I moved to Chicago and I started writing about ghosts, I became involved with actual fairly serious ghost hunting groups and then paranormal investigators, and that sort of spiraled into what it is today. And that's skipping a few chapters in the story, but me doing appearances and writing all of these different books, going on TV shows and things like that.
I know. Well, one of the big things about growing up in Maryland, it came after I left. And it was all the questions that I got about the Blair Witch Project. And I'm like,
oh, yeah.
I said, fake. And they're going, no, it's not. It's a documentary. I said, it's fake.
Yeah.
And they kept going, we want to go to this town. I said, the town is not haunted like that. I said, it's all fake. And I said, because if it had existed like that, if there was anything like that, all of us teenagers would have been going out there. We would have been out there checking it out. I said, and I told them, I said, specifically, I said, I hitchhiked all over, around Aberdeen Proving Grounds, all around Gunpowder, because not only did I live in Bel Air, I lived in Essex, I lived in Baltimore, I lived everywhere around there because that's how my life was. And I said, we went everywhere. We checked out everything. I even broke into the Edgar Allan Poe home. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you I was involved in some unusual things, and I would have went out there if it had existed, and there was no truth to it. And about 5 years ago, I think I saw on TV somebody who said they went out there and that there was a witch, and I'm like, no, there wasn't.
Yeah, it's so interesting how. No, go ahead.
No, it's true. It is. It's so interesting how people can believe that there really is when there isn't. I mean, walking through the woods, yeah, you might get creeped out, might think that you see something, but no, I think that movie created its own monster for that for that town.
It's a really good kind of like cautionary tale or case study in how that kind of works, because there never was a Blair Witch. It all came about with the movie. And I think I was around like 13 when the movie came out, and it was a really special moment in time because I was really excited. I was into the movie. I knew that it wasn't real, and I got to sort of sit back with my popcorn and watch other people debate about it. All the time people were debating back and forth about the reality of the Blair Witch, and the internet wasn't really popular yet for most people to kind of get online and talk about it. So nobody really had any like facts straight. And it was kind of fascinating to watch people like live and die by this idea that yes, the witch was real. No, the witch wasn't. And I remember my parents drove me out to where the movie was filmed. So it was partially filmed in Burkittsville, but then it was partially filmed somewhere down, the name escapes me now, but I know it was like around like the Potomac River, and it was in like close to not southern Maryland, but more south certainly than Burkittsville. And the house, the abandoned house that's at the end of the movie is in a totally different location. And I remember going to the house, and they still had it all like, it was all spray painted with those little witch figures and stuff on it. And I took these photos and back to my friends, and I was like, it can't be real because the house is in a completely different place than Burkittsville. Oh, and yeah. when I went to college I went to Hood College in Frederick. And for a time I worked at the Antietam battlefield, and the commute between those two went past Burkittsville. And I learned when I was working in these locations that there were some Civil War ghost stories related to the area, because there were some skirmishes around South Mountain. So people who live on South Mountain have reported certain ghost stories, or there's those tales of where you park your car and the car seems to move or be pushed by unseen hands, but it has nothing to do with anything about the witch. And I also heard that for years people in Burkittsville, at first I'm sure they were mortified because it's a super tiny town. I'm sure they were mortified that a movie was made about it, but there were also people like selling, homemade witch stick figures and stuff like that, off their front lawn. And they did that for years. They kind of decided, I guess, to embrace the fact that all these tourists were coming through the town. So they kind of capitalized on that.
Yeah. I think it was, what we were looking for was, Seneca Park out in Montgomery County.
That's it. Yes.
So
it was next to like an old missile silo. The whole area was really interesting out there where that house was. It was creepy unto itself in a cool way.
Right. And that's what's funny is that nobody ever went to look for any facts on this. They just go, oh, right. It's a documentary and it's real. And like I said, this was back in 1993. It's not like everybody had the internet to be able to go out there and look this up.
It's like, never mind the fact that like the FBI would anybody allow such footage to be shown in like national theaters,
Right. And it was just, to me, it was hilarious. And, then they come out, somebody starts talking about the goat man in Maryland. I'm like, okay, I'm not real big into cryptids. In fact, I was just on a show last night about Bigfoot, and I'm going to tell everybody who listened, thank you, but I still don't believe in Bigfoot. And just because it's not because I don't see him, it's just I need proof. But same with the goat man. I kind of need some proof that there is one. I'm not a huge cryptozoologist type believer at this point. I need a little bit of proof. And so that goat man I'd never heard of either. And I was like, okay. But about every other state has a crypto monster in its state that is a big deal. You could probably have a state crypto in just like you have a state bird.
Yeah, right.
It just made me laugh.
Interesting to see a map. I remember, so I didn't really hear much about the goat man either until I was an adult, and I was doing research from Chicago on, Maryland ghosts, and people were sending me their tales of goat man from when they were teenagers. So that would have been in like the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. But I do remember when I was growing up, there was a legend about Cecil County, which is, for people who aren't from Maryland, it's just northeast of where we grew up in Harford County. And there was the legend of the Pig Man, which is another legend that you see around the United States, and it revolves around, or Pig Woman, but there's a road there called like Pig Man Road, I think. And it's always some interesting story concocted of like either somebody who was severely deformed, or somebody who like went crazy and was killing people with a hatchet, or somebody who, an actual supernatural creature. And so I was always fascinated by those stories as a teenager, not because I really believed that they were true, but because I was always interested in the root of where they came from, because every crazy story like that has an interesting root somehow. So I was always fascinated by that kind of like dark underbelly of suburban Maryland, was that there were these weird stories that people told, and I don't know, that still fascinates me.
And I know some of the stories from that area go back to the colonial days.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to say, was it Native Americans trying to scare the white men? Something dressed up, and then just this, when this person that used to dress up like this died, maybe they became an elemental, something like that, to scare, doing his job. Residual spirit, maybe. Still doing his job all these years, still trying to scare the white men away. It's no different. I mean, it's a possibility. It's, when you think about it from that standpoint, we are always talking about residual spirits. And so is it possible that Goat Man and Pig Man were just things that were, Native Americans dressed up, trying to scare away the white men? Because if there was something walking around like that, you would think that people would want to leave. And that makes me think of The Village, the movie The Village with M. Night Shyamalan, which that movie ticks me off.
Resonated with me too. The sort of those creature costumes and everything. I remember I liked that movie a lot. I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but I liked it because it explored that kind of territory.
Well, it irritated me because it's like, why would people not question this? That's why it bothered me.
Right.
Mine was the logic, and so logically speaking, I was getting upset with the movie, and because I think M. Night Shyamalan does a great job with that type of stuff. Maybe if he had done the Blair Witch Project, maybe it'd been more believable. But I mean, apparently a lot of people still believe it, because I still come across things where people swear that the Blair Witch Project is real, and this is 1993 to almost 2020, and people are still believing that it's true.
It's still one of the number one questions that I get, not even necessarily from people who think it's real, but people who are just wondering about it. They're like, so you're from Maryland. What's up with the Blair Witch? And then, then I launch into the same thing that you and I have been talking about, which is sort of like trying to explain the whole story. But it was really interesting. It was an interesting time to be growing up and kind of have that as like a manufactured urban legend. But it also got me out in the woods. So
yeah. And I can see that. I mean, it was one of those things that just made me wonder. See, when I heard about it, I was already living in Kansas City, and I already had 2 or 3 kids. 93. I guess I was getting ready to have my 3rd kid. And so it really wasn't, an option for me to go back and check it out.
Yeah.
But it was one of those, but it came, my kids came, Mom, is that real? Is that real? So it started for me immediately, so it was very strange. And they wanted to get out of Atlas and look and see, where was it at? Where did you live? Mom, where did you live? And, all these places that you lived, where was it from here? And I mean, if they'd only known about all the experiments going on at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and it didn't matter where you lived by Aberdeen Proving Ground.
Yeah.
Right, because it's huge. And so it's one of those things that they were all so excited to tell everybody and their brother, hey, my mom's from Maryland. So every time I turned around, somebody was asking me about it. So I mean, it's not like I get to forget. But is there one story about Maryland that would freak somebody out if they didn't know? Let's see. No, I do know most of it. And we're going to have to think about this to come back with. Is there one story that somebody from Maryland may not know that would freak them out? Because I know that there's got to be something that because, I've been out of Maryland for 35 years. That's probably almost your whole life.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something that that I don't know. And I know that there's probably some things that I know that you don't know. But,
that's a really
there's got to
cool
be something.
Question.
Because I know that you're going to share something with me that's going to make me go, I got to go back. Because in all honesty, I haven't stopped in Maryland since 1989.
Oh, wow.
So it actually might be 1988. Actually, it was 1988. It was the last time that I was there. We drove through, but we didn't stop. So you're probably going to be able to tell me something I don't know. You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I will be back with Amelia Cotter in just a few minutes.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Several U.S. presidents are on record talking about the UFO mystery.
Yeah, Presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan both had UFO sightings of their own, but the current presidential campaign might be the first in which UFO disclosure has been championed by a major party candidate.
DIA, CIA, it moves around, is operating a program to train psychic spies to spy and use their powers against Russia. John Ronson writes about this in The Men Who Stare at Goats.
The first known sighting of a ghost took place right after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in the late 1860s during the administration of Ulysses Grant.
Project Paperclip, Clinton releases it all in 1998.
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I say, do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial.
It's a place where UFO hunters and scientists gather to examine paranormal activity in the region.
Some of the documents, this is bringing Nazi scientists into the United States to work here. So we fought against the Nazis, and it's not, this again is not a revelation. As early as 1947, 1946, we knew some of this, right?
On the paranormal, will we see U.S. President Barack Obama's foreign policy go intergalactic in a quest for gold stolen by aliens? We'll tell you at least how the White House responded to claims the chief executive has been teleporting to Mars. But let's get to today's Capitol account.
UFOs, hauntings, psychic abilities, conspiracy, ESP, cryptozoology. There are many things that remain unexplained in the inexplicable world around us, and we're talking about them here, looking for answers on WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. The truth is out there.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I was thinking of Haunted Road Media Paracon for some reason because we're just talking about it. But welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and my guest tonight is Amelia Cotter. And I asked her before the break, and if you guys remember, about is there a story from Maryland that somebody from Maryland may not know that might freak them out?
I am immediately thinking of Bel Air, where we had both lived. And I remember that on St. Mary's Church Road, there was a creepy abandoned house. And there were abandoned houses aplenty around at that time, but there was a particularly creepy abandoned house that was kind of in an open enough area where you could very clearly see it from the road. And I used to pass by it in my, driving around or driving with friends, and it always freaked me out. And then much later, after I moved away from Maryland and I was doing research for my book, Maryland Ghosts, I was interviewing, family and friends about their paranormal stories. My friend from high school said that she was driving by, let me start, at the beginning. She had told me that there was a legend about the house that, a man had murdered his family and then killed himself. So the classic murder-suicide story. There wasn't much, there wasn't really like a news story to go along with it or anything. This is just kind of like a trope that you can find attached to abandoned houses around the U.S. But that was the story that was told. And she said one night she was driving by there with her boyfriend at the time. And as their headlights passed in front of the house, they saw a little boy standing by the side of the road who looked like he was completely covered in mud or blood or both. And as soon as they passed by him, she slammed on the brakes and they turned around and, to look at the boy, to have a closer look at him. They slammed on the brakes and they physically turned their heads around, and he was gone. He was not there. And she said there would have been no way that there would have been enough time after they simply turned and then stopped to look back at this little boy standing at the side of the road for him to have run away or, anything like that. And they were really badly shaken by it. And she told this story to her boyfriend's mom, and her boyfriend's dad was an EMT and a firefighter. And his mom was saying that they could never sell that house. The house had stood abandoned for a long time. Nobody would want to move into it. Nobody would stay there for very long if they did. And then her boyfriend's dad, and now they're married, so now her husband's dad, eventually their fire company was called out there to do like one of those test burns where they would burn down like a local place so that the firefighters could practice. And so they all went out to watch the house burn down. And she sent a picture of her daughter standing in front of the house while it was burning. And it was just a very